They're locking up black men at 5 times the rate of everyone else in this country. 5 times. Police shootings caught on camera every single week. The wealth gap between black and white families is wider right now than it was back in 1968. Let that sink in for a moment. Wider than during the civil rights era. You scroll through the news and you see the same patterns repeating over and over again. The same oppression, the same injustice, the same systems crushing people down. You think it's just racism. You think it's just politics. You think maybe if we vote harder or protest louder, things will finally change. But what if I told you something that will shake you to your core? What if I told you that everything happening to black people in America right now was prophesied thousands of years ago? What if I told you that while you're sitting there watching the news feeling angry and powerless, the Bible already explained exactly what's happening and exactly why it's happening? I'm not talking about some vague interpretation. I'm talking about specific prophecies with specific details that match our reality with stunning accuracy. This isn't just oppression, this is judgment, biblical judgment. And the Bible tells us exactly whose judgment it is, how long it would last, and what comes next. Open your Bible to Revelation chapter 13 right now. What you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about the struggle of black people in America. This isn't just history. This isn't just social justice. This is prophecy unfolding right before your eyes. This is judgment. And you need to understand what that means for you right now in this moment. Let me tell you something that's going to shake you to your core. Revelation chapter 13 is not some mysterious prophecy about a future Antichrist coming to microchip everyone. That's what they taught you in church to keep you distracted from the real truth. Revelation 13 is happening right now. It's been happening for 400 years, and it's specifically about what happened to black people in America and across the diaspora. Let me read you verse 10 from Revelation chapter 13. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Now pause right there and think about that word. Captivity. What's the very first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that word? Slavery. The middle passage. 400 years of bondage. 12.5 million Africans stolen from their homeland, chained in the filthy bottoms of ships, brought to a strange land where they didn't speak the language, forced to work without pay, beaten, raped, murdered families, torn apart. That's captivity. That verse is talking about exactly that. And who are the saints mentioned in that verse? The saints are not just generic good people or church members. In biblical prophecy, the word saints refers to God's covenant people, the chosen people, Israel, the real Israel. Not the people occupying that land in the Middle East right now, the real descendants of the biblical Israelites, black Americans, your ancestors, your bloodline. This verse is talking directly about you. Let me show you another verse that will blow your mind. Revelation chapter 13 verse 7. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. The beast system made war with the saints. Let that sink deep into your spirit right now. A systematic, coordinated war against black people. Not random violence, not coincidental oppression, not just bad luck or historical accidents. A coordinated, prophesied war against God's people. Slavery wasn't just an economic system somebody came up with. Jim Crow wasn't just regional racism. Mass incarceration isn't just bad policy or tough-on-crime politics. It's a beast system making war with the saints, exactly as the Bible predicted thousands of years ago. And that phrase, to overcome them, do you understand what that means? That's what it looked like when they lynched your great-grandfather for looking at a white woman the wrong way. That's what it looked like when they burned down Black Wall Street in Tulsa in 1921 and killed up to 300 people. That's what it looked like when they bombed the Move House in Philadelphia in 1985 and killed 11 people, including 5 children. To overcome them. Systematic destruction of black people who dared to rise up. But here's what they didn't tell you in church. Here's what your pastor never preached about. That same chapter, Revelation 13, talks about economic control. Let me read verses 16 and 17. And he causeth all both small and great rich and poor free and bond to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark. You've heard about the mark of the beast your whole life, haven't you? Preachers scared you with stories about computer chips and barcodes and one world government. They told you to watch out for some future dictator who's going to force everyone to get a microchip implant. But the mark has already been here. The mark has been on black people for 400 years. Let me break this down for you. The mark on the right hand. That's your labor. That's the work of your hands. Forced to work in a system, you didn't create a system that doesn't benefit you, a system that extracts your labor and gives you scraps just so you can survive. Slavery was forced labor without any pay at all. Your ancestors worked from sunrise to sunset in cotton fields, building wealth for slave masters while getting nothing. That's the mark on the right hand. Sharecropping after slavery ended was economic slavery under a different name. Black farmers trapped in debt to white landowners working the land, but never owning it, never getting ahead. That's the mark on the right hand. Mass incarceration today is prison labor for 23 cents an hour, making products for major corporations while locked in a cage. That's the mark on the right hand. Even if you're not in prison, most people have to work jobs in systems they don't control, just to pay rent and buy food. Your labor extracted by corporations that don't care about you. That's the mark on the right hand. The mark on the forehead. That's your mind. That's your thoughts. That's your beliefs. That's your identity. Brainwashed to accept white supremacy as normal. Taught in school to hate yourself and your history. Programmed to think you're inferior, you're cursed, you're not chosen, you're just descendants of slaves with no history before that. That's the mark on the forehead. Mental slavery, and that economic control the Bible talks about no man might buy or sell without the mark. Let me tell you about a policy called redlining. From the 1930s through the 1960s, the federal government literally drew red lines on maps around black neighborhoods. They told banks not to give mortgages to black families in those areas. They blocked black people from buying homes. Now understand this. Home ownership is the #1 way families build generational wealth in America. You buy a house, it appreciates in value. You pass it down to your children. They have a foundation to build on. The beast system blocked black people from buying. They couldn't access that wealth-building tool. After slavery ended and they created the sharecropping system, black farmers couldn't sell their crops freely. White landowners controlled everything, set the prices, kept them in perpetual debt, controlled when and how they could sell, couldn't sell. Today, with mass incarceration, a criminal record blocks you from employment, from housing, from business loans, from opportunity. Can't buy or sell. Do you see the patterns? The mark of the beast isn't coming in some future apocalypse. It's been here. It's been on black people for 4 centuries. The Bible predicted the economic slavery that would be imposed. The mark isn't just future, it's been active. Now I'm going to break down every single verse of Revelation chapter 13 and show you exactly verse by verse how it describes the judgment and oppression of black people. Because once you see this connection, once you understand what the prophecy is really saying, you can never unsee it. Your entire understanding of history and current events will change forever. Let's start at the beginning. Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. A beast rising up out of the sea. Now think about this carefully. Where did the slave ships come from? They came from across the Atlantic Ocean, from Europe. European colonial powers rising up from the sea, crossing the waters to Africa, to capture and enslave millions. The 7 heads represent 7 major colonial empires that dominated the world: Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, Netherlands, Belgium, and eventually America. These 7 empires carved up the entire continent of Africa like a pie. They drew arbitrary borders. They enslaved millions of people. They committed genocide against indigenous peoples in the Americas. 7 heads of the beast. 7 colonial powers. The 10 horns with crowns represent 10 kingdoms, or 10 systems of white supremacy that were established globally. Political power controlling governments. Economic power controlling wealth. Military power controlling through violence. Religious power controlling through twisted theology. Educational systems controlling what people learn. Legal systems controlling through unjust laws. Media systems controlling narratives and information. All these systems designed to keep one group on top and black people on the bottom. 10 horns, 10 crowns, 10 systems of control, and it says upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Blasphemy means speaking against God or claiming God's authority when you have absolutely no right to do so. What did the slave masters do? They used the Bible to justify slavery. They told enslaved Africans that God cursed black people through Ham. They said slavery was God's will. They twisted scripture to make God endorse their evil. They set themselves up as gods over other human beings, deciding who lives and who dies, who gets beaten and who gets sold, who gets to keep their children and whose family gets ripped apart. That's blasphemy written on the heads of the beast. They claim divine authority for demonic actions. Verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. 3 animals mentioned here: the leopard, the bear, the lion. In biblical prophecy, these animals represent specific kingdoms from history. The lion is often associated with Babylon, the bear with Medo-Persia, the leopard with Greece. This beast system combines elements of all previous oppressive empires throughout history. It's the culmination of thousands of years of human tyranny and domination rolled into one system. But here's the key phrase you cannot miss. The dragon gave him his power. Who is the dragon in the book of Revelation? Satan, the devil, Lucifer. This means the slave trade, colonialism, white supremacy. All of it is powered by demonic, satanic, spiritual forces. This isn't just human evil. This isn't just people being mean or greedy. There are principalities and powers, spiritual wickedness in high places behind this entire system. The Apostle Paul tells us in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." The enslavement of black people wasn't just about making money from cotton and sugar. It was spiritual warfare. The devil knew who the real Israelites were. He knew black people carried the bloodline of the biblical Hebrews, and he inspired a system specifically designed to destroy them, to break their connection to God, to erase their identity, to crush their spirit. That's why the slavery system was so uniquely brutal. That's why it lasted so long. That's why it evolved into new forms instead of just ending. That's why it's still going on today, in different forms, like mass incarceration. The dragon gave the beast his power. Verse 4. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? People worshipped the beast. What does that mean? It means they gave allegiance to the system. They believed in it. They participated in it willingly. They benefited from it and defended it. They built monuments to it and wrote laws to protect it. And they asked, Who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? Translation. The beast system seemed completely invincible. European colonial powers had superior weapons that Africans had never seen before. Guns, cannons, steel swords, massive ships that could cross oceans. Africans had spears and shields and traditional weapons. The technological gap made it seem like the beast couldn't be defeated by any human power. Who can make war against him? And for 400 years, it seemed like they were absolutely right. Slavery couldn't be stopped. Even after the Civil War supposedly ended slavery, Jim Crow couldn't be stopped. Even after the Civil Rights Movement supposedly ended, Jim Crow's systemic racism and mass incarceration seem impossible to dismantle. The beast seems invincible even today. But here's what you need to understand about this prophecy. This beast didn't oppress everyone equally. It specifically targeted black people. It came specifically for the descendants of the biblical Israelites living in West Africa. Why? Because this is judgment. When God's people break covenant with Him, when they turn away from His laws and commandments, when they worship other gods and forget who they are, God removes His divine protection, and He allows their enemies to oppress them as judgment. That's the pattern throughout the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. Israel disobeys God. God warns them through prophets. They don't listen. God removes His protection. Enemies conquer them. They go into captivity. They suffer under oppression. Then, after the appointed time of judgment is complete, God restores them. That's exactly what happened with the transatlantic slave trade. The descendants of the real Israelites had migrated to West Africa over centuries after various diasporas and dispersions from the land of Israel. They intermarried with African peoples. They established kingdoms. But over time, many lost their connection to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They broke covenant, and God allowed the beast system to rise up and lead them into captivity for 400 years. This isn't about blaming the victims. This isn't about saying black people deserved slavery. Absolutely not. This is about understanding prophetic patterns. This is about recognizing what really happened in the spiritual realm, behind the physical events we see in history books. Now let's look at verse 5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. 42 months. In biblical prophecy, a prophetic month is 30 days. 42 months equals 1,260 days. And in prophecy, a day often represents a year, based on the principle in Numbers chapter 14, verse 34, and Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6. So 1,260 prophetic days could equal 1,260 literal years. Some scholars apply this timeline to various aspects of the beast system's reign through history. But let me show you something even more powerful that connects to another prophecy. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 15, verse 13. God is speaking to Abraham, and He says, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. 400 years of affliction. God told Abraham directly that his descendants would be strangers in a foreign land, enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. This prophecy was partially fulfilled when the Israelites were in Egypt. They went down to Egypt during a famine, they multiplied. Pharaoh enslaved them. They suffered for generations until Moses led them out. But prophecy in the Bible often has multiple fulfillments. The same pattern repeats. And this prophecy was fulfilled again with Black Americans. Let me show you the math and you tell me if this is coincidence. 1619. That's when the first enslaved Africans were brought to Jamestown, Virginia. The beginning of chattel slavery in what would become the United States of America. 1619 to 2019. Count it up. That's exactly 400 years. The prophecy of 400 years of affliction, fulfilled to the exact year. Now let me break down those 400 years for you. Slavery from 1619 to 1865, when the 13th Amendment supposedly ended it. That's 246 years of pure chattel slavery. Then Jim Crow segregation from 1865 to 1965, when the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act supposedly ended it. That's another 100 years of legal oppression, apartheid lynching, economic exclusion separate but equal, which was never equal. Then mass incarceration and systemic racism from 1965 to 2019. That's 54 more years of the prison-industrial complex war on drugs mandatory minimums, 3 strikes laws, police brutality, economic discrimination. Add it all up. 246 plus 100 plus 54 equals 400 years. Total of continuous affliction, under different names and different systems, but the same oppression. The prophecy was fulfilled. Verse 7 again, let me read it one more time. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, and tongues, and nations. The beast made war with the saints globally, not just in America, not just in one location. Look at the scope of the slave trade. It affected the entire continent of Africa, the Caribbean islands, South America, Central America, North America. Black people were enslaved and oppressed all over the world, all kindreds, tongues, and nations. Brazil had slavery and enslaved more Africans than any other country. Haiti had slavery until the people rose up in the only successful slave rebellion in history. Jamaica had slavery. Cuba had slavery. Every single European colony participated in this system. This was a coordinated global system, making war on black people everywhere they were scattered. And the phrase "to overcome them" describes what it looked like on the ground in specific historical events. Let me tell you about the Atlanta Race Massacre of 1906. White mobs attacked black neighborhoods in Atlanta, Georgia, for 3 straight days. At least 25 black people were killed, though the real number is probably much higher. Some reports say it could have been over 100. Black men were hunted down in the streets, like animals, beaten with clubs, stabbed, shot, hanged from lampposts. Black businesses looted and destroyed. That's what "to overcome them" looked like. Let me tell you about the Springfield Massacre of 1908 in Springfield, Illinois. A white mob numbering in the thousands descended on black neighborhoods. 6 black people were killed. 2 were lynched in public while crowds watched and cheered. Thousands of black residents were driven out of the city permanently. Over $150,000 in property damage in 1908, money which would be millions in today's dollars. Black homes and businesses burned to the ground. That's what "to overcome them" looked like. Let me tell you about the Rosewood Massacre of 1923 in Florida. A white mob attacked a predominantly black town called Rosewood. The violence lasted for several days. Virtually every single building in the town was burned to the ground. The official death toll was 8 people, 6 black and 2 white. But survivors who lived through it said up to 27 black people were actually killed. They spoke of bodies being buried in mass graves. Families fled into the swamps to hide. The entire town was completely wiped off the map. That's what "to overcome them" looked like. Let me tell you about the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, one of the worst incidents of racial violence in American history. The Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was known as Black Wall Street. It was one of the most prosperous black communities in the entire country. Black doctors, black lawyers, black business owners, black families with wealth and property. On May 31st and June 1st of 1921, white mobs burned it all down. Up to 300 black people were killed. Some estimates say even more. Over 1,200 homes destroyed. 35 city blocks reduced to ash. Churches, schools, hospitals, businesses, a library, all of it destroyed. And here's the part that should shock you. Planes flew over the neighborhood and dropped bombs and firebombs from the sky onto black homes and businesses. Private planes dropping incendiary devices on American citizens on American soil. That's what to overcome them looked like. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't riots. This was systematic, organized military-style attacks against black people who were thriving and building wealth. Every single time black people built something, every time they created prosperous communities, every time they started to rise up economically, the beast system came to destroy it. That's the prophecy being fulfilled over and over again. That's making war with the saints and overcoming them. Now verse 10 is crucial. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. This verse has two parts, and you need to understand both. First, it describes what happened to black people. They were led into captivity, the Middle Passage, slavery, bondage in a foreign land, captivity for 400 years, exactly as prophesied. But then the second part gives a promise of reversal. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. Those who enslaved others will themselves be enslaved. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. This is divine justice. This is God's promise that the oppressors will be repaid. What they did will be done back to them. Vengeance belongs to God, and He will repay. And then it says, here is the patience and the faith of the saints. This is talking about the absolutely incredible supernatural endurance of black people through 400 years of unimaginable suffering. 400 years of slavery, lynching massacres, discrimination, segregation, police brutality, economic oppression, cultural destruction, psychological warfare. And black people are still here, still surviving, still faithful to God, still believing, still fighting for justice, still raising families, still building communities, still holding on to hope. That's the patience and the faith of the saints. Your ancestors endured literal hell on earth, and they passed down their faith to you. They held on to belief in God, even when everything around them said God had abandoned them. That's not just human strength. That's supernatural. That's prophetic. That's the patience of the saints that the Bible talks about. Now let's look at verse 11, and this is where it gets even more specific. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Another beast, a second beast. Notice this one doesn't come from the sea like the first beast. This one comes up out of the earth, out of the land, out of the wilderness. The first beast, the European colonial powers, came from across the ocean. This second beast rises from the land itself, from the New World, from the American continent. This is the United States of America. The United States is the second beast in Revelation chapter 13. And look at the description John gives. 2 horns like a lamb. The lamb throughout the book of Revelation represents Jesus Christ. So this beast looks like Christ. It appears innocent and righteous and Christian. It presents itself as godly. What were America's 2 founding principles? That it claimed to be built on civil liberty and religious freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence, freedom of religion in the First Amendment. Those are the two horns that look like a lamb. America presented itself to the world as a Christian nation, a city on a hill, a beacon of freedom and democracy, a place where people could worship God freely and live free from tyranny. But the second part of the verse reveals the horrifying truth. And he spake as a dragon. It looks like a lamb, but it speaks like Satan. It looks like Christ, but it acts like the devil. America was founded on beautiful Christian principles on paper, but it was built on the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of Africans. That's speaking like a dragon while looking like a lamb. That's the fundamental contradiction of America, founded on the idea that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, while simultaneously holding millions of black people in chains as property, founded on religious freedom, while forcing enslaved people to convert to Christianity and using the Bible to justify their bondage. Two horns like a lamb, but speaks as a dragon. Verse 12. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. America inherited all the power of the European colonial system, the first beast, and America perfected it. European nations had slavery in their colonies, but America turned it into an industrial machine of unprecedented scale and brutality. Massive cotton plantations stretching across the South, breeding farms where they forced enslaved people to reproduce to create more slaves, generational slavery, where your children were automatically born into bondage, and their children forever. That's exercising all the power of the first beast and taking it to the next level. And after the Civil War supposedly ended slavery, what actually happened? Sharecropping, which was economic slavery under a different name. Convict leasing, where they arrested black people on fake charges and leased them out to work for free. Black codes and Jim Crow laws that stripped away every right. Segregation that lasted another 100 years. America found new ways to continue the beast system instead of actually ending it. Then, after the civil rights movement supposedly ended Jim Crow in the 1960s, what happened next? Mass incarceration. The war on drugs, specifically targeting black communities. Mandatory minimum sentences. 3 strikes laws. Private prisons turning incarceration into a profit industry. America keeps evolving the beast system. It adapts. It changes forms. But the core oppression continues. It exercises all the power of the first beast and keeps it going under new names. Verses 13 and 14. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. Fire coming down from heaven. What does that sound like to you, military might? Technological power beyond what anyone else has. America dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. Literal fire from heaven that destroyed entire cities in seconds. America has the most powerful military in all of human history. Drones that can strike anywhere in the world. Missiles that can travel thousands of miles. Satellites watching from space. Stealth bombers. Nuclear weapons. Fire from heaven. And America uses this overwhelming power to deceive the world. The American dream. Democracy and freedom. Opportunity for all. Land of the free, home of the brave. People all over the world worship American culture. They want American music, American movies, American brands, American technology. Everyone wants to come to America. It's seen as the greatest nation on earth. But for black people, America has been 400 years of nightmare. Slavery, segregation, lynching, mass incarceration. police brutality, economic exclusion. The deception is incredibly powerful. Even black people got deceived into thinking that if we just integrate, if we just get education, if we just work hard and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, we'll be free and equal. But the system was never designed to free you. It was designed to control you, to extract your labor, to keep you at the bottom. That's the deception. Verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Those who refused to worship the beast system, those who refused to bow down and play along, those who stood up and spoke out against the oppression, they were killed. Let me give you specific names of people you know. Malcolm X, assassinated in 1965. Martin Luther King Jr., assassinated in 1968. Fred Hampton, leader of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, assassinated by police in 1969, shot in his bed while sleeping. Medgar Evers, civil rights activist, assassinated in 1963. These are just the famous ones. There are countless others whose names we don't even know. And it wasn't just in America. Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected leader of the Congo, assassinated in 1961 with CIA involvement because he wouldn't bow to Western interests. Thomas Sankara, revolutionary leader in Burkina Faso, who stood up to France and the World Bank, assassinated in 1987. Every black leader who stood up to the system, who challenged white supremacy, who refused to compromise, who wouldn't worship the image of the beast, was killed. That's the prophecy. 'Cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. If you worshiped the beast, if you played by their rules, if you stayed in your place and didn't make trouble, you might survive. But if you challenged the system, if you rejected the programming, if you refused to worship, they killed you. That's the pattern throughout history. And it's still happening today. How many black activists have died under mysterious circumstances? How many have been imprisoned on false charges? How many have been silenced and erased? The prophecy is still active right now. Now we get to the most famous part of Revelation 13 that everyone has heard about. Verses 16 and 17. And he causeth all both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The mark of the beast. Everyone's heard of it. It's in movies and books and conspiracy theories. Most people think it's something in the future that hasn't happened yet. A microchip under the skin, a barcode tattoo, some kind of digital ID or cryptocurrency. But I'm here to tell you, the mark is already here. It's been here for 400 years. And once you understand what it really means, you'll see it operating all around you right now. Let me break it down piece by piece. The mark in the right hand. Your right hand represents your labor, your work, your productivity. What do you do with your hands? You work, you produce, you create, you build. During slavery, black people's labor was completely controlled by slave masters. They worked from before sunrise to after sunset in the fields, picking cotton, harvesting, tobacco, cutting sugar cane. Their hands belonged to the master. Everything they produced went to the master. They got nothing. That's the mark on the right hand. Complete control of your labor. After slavery supposedly ended, what happened? Sharecropping. Black farmers worked land owned by white landowners. They planted crops and harvested crops and did all the labor. But at the end of the season, the landowner would sell the crops. The landowner controlled the scales to weigh the harvest. The landowner kept the financial records. The landowner set the prices. And somehow, no matter how hard the sharecropper worked, no matter how much they produced, They always ended up in debt to the landowner. The landowner would charge inflated prices for seeds and tools, charge rent for the shack they lived in, charge interest on credit extended during the year. And the sharecropper couldn't leave until the debt was paid. But the debt could never be paid because the system was rigged. If a sharecropper tried to leave, they could be arrested for owing a debt. Some were literally put in chains and forced back to work. This was slavery under a different name, and sharecroppers couldn't sell their crops freely on the open market. They had to go through the landowner. No man might buy or sell without going through the beast system. This continued for generations. Some black families were trapped in sharecropping from the 1870s through the 1940s. 70 years of economic slavery. Now let me tell you about the Thibodaux Massacre of 1887 that's directly connected to economic oppression. In Louisiana, black sugarcane workers were organizing to demand fair wages. They were being paid poverty wages and paid in scrip, basically fake money that could only be used at the plantation store where prices were inflated. They wanted to be paid $1.25 a day in real cash. They formed a union with help from the Knights of Labor, one of the few unions that organized black workers. In November 1887, during harvest season when their labor was most needed, about 10,000 workers went on strike. This terrified the white plantation owners. If the cane wasn't harvested, it would rot and they'd lose money. The strike threatened their profits. White vigilantes armed themselves and descended on the town of Thibodaux, where many strikers lived. They set up checkpoints demanding passes from any black person entering or leaving town. On November 23rd, gunfire erupted. No one knows who fired first, but the white militia and vigilantes used it as an excuse to massacre black workers. The former governor of Louisiana, who was a sugar planter, deployed the all-white state militia. They brought a Gatling gun, an early machine gun. Militia and vigilantes went through black neighborhoods shooting suspected strikers. They shot black people indiscriminately. Approximately 60 black workers were killed, some estimates say up to 100. Bodies were thrown in unmarked graves. The killings spread to nearby plantations. Workers who survived had to hide in swamps and woods. And what happened to the strike? It was crushed. Black workers were forced back to the plantations on the owners' terms. No wage increase, no union. The plantation owners won. And here's what should enrage you. The Southern press praised the massacre. They called it necessary to maintain order. Andrew Price, one of the sugar planters who participated in the killings, was elected to Congress in 1888. The murderers were celebrated. They got statues and streets named after them. The workers got unmarked graves. That's what happened when black people tried to demand fair wages, tried to control their own labor, tried to sell their work on their own terms. The beast system killed them. That's the Mark system in action. You can't buy or sell outside the system without facing violence. Now let me show you modern captivity through mass incarceration. Revelation chapter 13 verse 10 says, "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity." Captivity didn't end with slavery. It evolved. Let me read you the 13th Amendment to the Constitution that supposedly ended slavery in 1865. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. Do you see that exception clause? Except as punishment for crime. Slavery is still legal in America if you're convicted of a crime. That loophole has been exploited for 160 years. Immediately after the Civil War, Southern states passed black codes, criminalizing things like vagrancy, loitering, not having a job, breaking a labor contract. Things that specifically targeted newly freed black people. They arrested black people en masse on these fake charges. Then they used the convict leasing system. The state would lease out prisoners to private companies to work for free. Coal mines, railroad construction, plantations, all using convict labor that was 90% black. Prisoners worked in brutal conditions. Many died, but companies made huge profits. This was slavery by another name. Today we have the largest prison population in the world. Over 2 million people incarcerated in America. Black people are 13% of the US population, but 40% of the prison population. Black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. Why the war on drugs that started in the 1970s and exploded in the 1980s specifically targeted black communities? Crack cocaine, which was more common in black neighborhoods, carried sentences 100 times harsher than powder cocaine, which was more common among white users. Same drug, different form, wildly different sentences. That was intentional. Mandatory minimum sentences meant judges had no discretion. 3 strikes laws meant a third offense, even for something minor, could mean life in prison. Private prison companies lobbied for harsher sentencing laws because more prisoners meant more profit. It's an industry. And what do prisoners do? They work. Prison labor is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Prisoners make products for major corporations. They fight wildfires in California for $1 an hour, risking their lives. They make furniture, clothing, electronics. They work in call centers, all for pennies an hour, or sometimes literally nothing. That's the mark on the right hand. Forced labor. Slavery is alive. And when prisoners are released, they have a criminal record that follows them forever. Can't get hired because employers do background checks and won't hire felons. Can't rent an apartment because landlords do background checks. Can't get business loans. Can't get professional licenses. In many states, you can't even vote, even after serving time. That criminal record becomes a mark that blocks you from buying and selling, from participating in society as a free person. And the system is designed to give black people criminal records at much higher rates than anyone else. Arrests for things that white people don't get arrested for. Harsher charges for the same crimes. Longer sentences for the same crimes. Every step of the criminal justice system has racial disparities. This isn't accident. This is design. This is the beast system leading black people into captivity in the 21st century. On May 13, 1985, this prophecy manifested in one of the most shocking ways imaginable. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the police department literally bombed black residents. The MOVE organization, a black liberation group, had a house in a black neighborhood. The city wanted them out. On that day, approximately 500 police officers surrounded the MOVE house. They cut off water and electricity. When MOVE members didn't surrender, police opened fire with over 10,000 rounds of ammunition in 90 minutes. Then at 2 p.m., a police helicopter dropped 2 bombs made of explosives onto the roof of the house. The bombs detonated. They ignited a fire. And here's the most horrifying part. The fire department arrived, but the police ordered them to not put out the fire. They let it burn. The fire spread to neighboring houses. 61 homes burned down. An entire neighborhood destroyed. 11 MOVE members died in that house, including 5 children. A 13-year-old boy and 1 adult woman were the only survivors. They tried to escape the burning building, but police shot at them. The woman Ramona Africa said police fired on anyone trying to flee. Police claimed MOVE members shot first, but only 2 people survived to tell a different story, and the police had 500 officers and overwhelming force. Who are you going to believe? Approximately 250 people lost their homes in the fire, an entire black neighborhood destroyed. And what happened to the officials responsible? The police commissioner resigned. That's it. No one went to jail for dropping bombs on civilians, for killing children, for destroying a neighborhood. This happened in America in 1985. That's only 40 years ago. That's the beast system in action. That's making war with the saints. That's leading into captivity through violence and terror. Now let me show you the mark on the forehead, the mental and cultural captivity. Revelation chapter 13 verse 16 talks about a mark in their foreheads. This is control of the mind, your thoughts, your identity, your sense of self. During slavery, everything was done to destroy African identity and replace it with slave identity. Enslaved people were forbidden from speaking their native languages. Children born into slavery never learned the languages of their ancestors. They were forced to speak only English. That's linguistic genocide. They were stripped of their African names, given names chosen by slave masters, often named after the master's family, or given degrading names, or just numbered. Your name is part of your identity. When they took your name, they took part of who you are. They were forbidden from practicing African religions, beaten or killed for having African spiritual practices, forced to convert to Christianity. Now, Christianity itself isn't the problem. The problem is, it was forced, and it was a twisted version that taught slaves to obey their masters, that suffering in this life would be rewarded in heaven, that slavery was God's will. They used religion as a tool of control. That's the mark on the forehead. They made it illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write. Knowledge is power. If you can read, you can learn. You can think for yourself. You can question. So they kept people illiterate by law. Anyone caught teaching a slave to read could be fined or imprisoned. Slaves caught reading could be beaten or killed. That's control of the mind. After slavery ended, what happened? The education system taught black children a version of history that erased Africa, that started their story with slavery, that taught them their ancestors were primitive and inferior. Ancient Egypt was taught as separate from black Africa, even though Egypt is in Africa, and ancient Egyptians were black. The great African empires like Mali, Songhai, Kush, Great Zimbabwe, these were left out of textbooks. Black children learned about European history, European achievements, European heroes, but nothing about their own heritage. That's programming the mind with inferiority. That's the mark on the forehead. You're taught to think of yourself the way the beast system wants you to think. You're programmed with beliefs that keep you mentally enslaved, even if you're physically free. And that economic control the Bible talks about, no man might buy or sell without the mark. This is where it gets crystal clear. Let me tell you about redlining. This was an official government policy. From the 1930s through the 1960s, the federal government created maps of cities across America. They literally drew lines on these maps, often in red ink, around neighborhoods where black people lived. Then they told banks and mortgage lenders not to give home loans to people in those areas. They blocked black people from buying homes. Now understand the significance of this. Home ownership is the primary way families in America build wealth and pass it down to the next generation. You buy a house with a mortgage. Over 30 years, you pay it off. The house appreciates in value. Now you have an asset worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can borrow against it. You can pass it to your children when you die. Your children don't have to start from zero. They inherit wealth and property. But black families were blocked from this wealth-building tool. They were forced to rent. Rent money goes to landlords and builds zero equity. No property to pass down. No generational wealth. Today, the median wealth of white families is $189,000. The median wealth of black families is $24,000. That's an 8-to-1 wealth gap. And it's a direct result of the mark system blocking black people from buying homes for decades. They couldn't buy. Redlining wasn't officially ended until the Fair Housing Act of 1968. That's only 57 years ago. Your parents or grandparents lived through this. This isn't distant history. And even after 1968, discrimination continued through other means. Higher interest rates for black borrowers, predatory lending, steering black families to certain neighborhoods. The mark system adapted, but kept operating. Let me tell you about the sharecropping system after slavery. When slavery supposedly ended in 1865, with the 13th Amendment, 4 million formerly enslaved people were free. But free to do what they had: no land, no money, no education, because it had been illegal to teach them, no resources. The former slave owners still had the land. They came up with a system: sharecropping. Black families could work the land in exchange for a share of the crops at harvest time. Sounds fair, right? But here's how it actually worked. The landowner provided land seeds, tools, and a place to live. The sharecropper did all the work: planting, tending, harvesting. At the end of the season, the landowner would sell the crops. The landowner controlled the scales to weigh the harvest. The landowner kept the financial records. The landowner set the prices. And somehow, no matter how hard the sharecropper worked, no matter how much they produced, they always ended up in debt to the landowner. The landowner would charge inflated prices for seeds and tools, charge rent for the shack they lived in, charge interest on credit extended during the year, and the sharecropper couldn't leave until the debt was paid. But the debt could never be paid because the system was rigged. If a sharecropper tried to leave, they could be arrested for owing a debt. Some were literally put in chains and forced back to work. This was slavery under a different name, and sharecroppers couldn't sell their crops freely on the open market. They had to go through the landowner. No man might buy or sell without going through the beast system. This continued for generations. Some black families were trapped in sharecropping from the 1870s through the 1940s. 70 years of economic slavery. Now let me show you modern captivity through mass incarceration. Revelation chapter 13 verse 10 says, "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity." Captivity didn't end with slavery. It evolved. Let me read you the 13th Amendment to the Constitution that supposedly ended slavery in 1865. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. Do you see that exception clause, except as punishment for crime? Slavery is still legal in America if you're convicted of a crime. That loophole has been exploited for 160 years. Immediately after the Civil War, Southern states passed black codes criminalizing things like vagrancy, loitering, not having a job, breaking a labor contract. Things that specifically targeted newly freed black people. They arrested black people en masse on these fake charges. Then they used the convict leasing system. The state would lease out prisoners to private companies to work for free. Coal mines, railroad construction, plantations, all using convict labor that was 90% black. Prisoners worked in brutal conditions. Many died. But companies made huge profits. This was slavery by another name. Today we have the largest prison population in the world. Over 2 million people incarcerated in America. Black people are 13% of the US population, but 40% of the prison population. Black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. Why the war on drugs that started in the 1970s and exploded in the 1980s specifically targeted black communities? Crack cocaine, which was more common in black neighborhoods, carried sentences 100 times harsher than powder cocaine, which was more common among white users. Same drug, different form, wildly different sentences. That was intentional. Mandatory minimum sentences meant judges had no discretion. 3 strikes laws meant a third offense, even for something minor, could mean life in prison. Private prison companies lobbied for harsher sentencing laws because more prisoners meant more profit. It's an industry. And what do prisoners do? They work. Prison labor is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Prisoners make products for major corporations. They fight wildfires in California for $1 an hour, risking their lives. They make furniture, clothing, electronics. They work in call centers. All for pennies an hour, or sometimes literally nothing. That's the mark on the right hand. Forced labor. Slavery is alive. And when prisoners are released, they have a criminal record that follows them forever. Can't get hired because employers do background checks and won't hire felons. Can't rent an apartment because landlords do background checks. Can't get business loans. Can't get professional licenses. In many states, you can't even vote, even after serving time. That criminal record becomes a mark that blocks you from buying and selling, from participating in society as a free person. And the system is designed to give black people criminal records at much higher rates than anyone else. Arrests for things that white people don't get arrested for. Harsher charges for the same crimes. Longer sentences for the same crimes. Every step of the criminal justice system has racial disparities. This isn't accident. This is design. This is the beast system leading black people into captivity in the 21st century. On May 13, 1985, this prophecy manifested in one of the most shocking ways imaginable. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the police department literally bombed black residents. The MOVE organization, a black liberation group, had a house in a black neighborhood. The city wanted them out. On that day, approximately 500 police officers surrounded the MOVE house. They cut off water and electricity. When MOVE members didn't surrender, police opened fire with over 10,000 rounds of ammunition in 90 minutes. Then at 2 p.m., a police helicopter dropped 2 bombs made of explosives onto the roof of the house. The bombs detonated. They ignited a fire. And here's the most horrifying part. The fire department arrived, but the police ordered them to not put out the fire. They let it burn. The fire spread to neighboring houses. 61 homes burned down. An entire neighborhood destroyed. 11 MOVE members died in that house, including 5 children. A 13-year-old boy and 1 adult woman were the only survivors. They tried to escape the burning building, but police shot at them. The woman Ramona Africa said police fired on anyone trying to flee. Police claimed MOVE members shot first, but only 2 people survived to tell a different story, and the police had 500 officers and overwhelming force. Who are you going to believe? Approximately 250 people lost their homes in the fire, an entire black neighborhood destroyed, and what happened to the officials responsible? The police commissioner resigned. That's it. No one went to jail for dropping bombs on civilians, for killing children, for destroying a neighborhood. This happened in America in 1985. That's only 40 years ago. That's the beast system in action. That's making war with the saints. That's leading into captivity through violence and terror. Now let me show you the mark on the forehead, the mental and cultural captivity. Revelation chapter 13 verse 16 talks about a mark in their foreheads. This is control of the mind, your thoughts, your identity, your sense of self. During slavery, everything was done to destroy African identity and replace it with slave identity. Enslaved people were forbidden from speaking their native languages. Children born into slavery never learned the languages of their ancestors. They were forced to speak only English. That's linguistic genocide. They were stripped of their African names, given names chosen by slave masters, often named after the master's family or given degrading names, or just numbered. Your name is part of your identity. When they took your name, they took part of who you are. They were forbidden from practicing African religions, beaten or killed for having African spiritual practices, forced to convert to Christianity. Now, Christianity itself isn't the problem. The problem is, it was forced, and it was a twisted version that taught slaves to obey their masters, that suffering in this life would be rewarded in heaven, that slavery was God's will. They used religion as a tool of control. That's the mark on the forehead. They made it illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write. Knowledge is power. If you can read, you can learn. You can think for yourself. You can question. So they kept people illiterate by law. Anyone caught teaching a slave to read could be fined or imprisoned. Slaves caught reading could be beaten or killed. That's control of the mind. After slavery ended, what happened? The education system taught black children a version of history that erased Africa, that started their story with slavery, that taught them their ancestors were primitive and inferior. Ancient Egypt was taught as separate from black Africa, even though Egypt is in Africa, and ancient Egyptians were black. The great African empires like Mali, Songhai, Kush, Great Zimbabwe, these were left out of textbooks. Black children learned about European history, European achievements, European heroes. But nothing about their own heritage. That's programming the mind with inferiority. That's the mark on the forehead. You're taught to think of yourself the way the beast system wants you to think. You're programmed with beliefs that keep you mentally enslaved, even if you're physically free. The media continued the programming for decades. Movies and television portrayed black people as criminals, as maids and servants, as unintelligent comic relief, as violent and dangerous. For generations, those were the only images black children saw of themselves. Negative stereotypes repeated over and over create beliefs. If you see yourself portrayed as inferior constantly, you start to internalize it. That's psychological warfare. That's the mark on the forehead. Even beauty standards were weaponized. Straight hair is beautiful. Kinky hair is nappy and needs to be fixed. Light skin is better than dark skin. European features are the standard of beauty. Black children grew up being told their natural hair, their skin color, their features were wrong and needed to be changed. That's programming self-hatred. That's the mark on the forehead. The lie they put in your mind, that you're inferior, that you're not chosen, that you're cursed, that you're just descendants of slaves with no history before that. That's the mark on the forehead. And it's been so effective that many black people today don't know their true identity, don't know they're descendants of the biblical Israelites, don't know the prophecies about them, don't know their true heritage. The mark has done its job, but that mark can be removed. When you learn the truth, when you study real history, when you read the prophecies and see yourself in them, that mark starts to fade. Your mind becomes free even if your circumstances haven't changed yet. That's why this knowledge is so dangerous to the system. That's why they don't teach this in schools and churches. Because if black people understood who they really are, understood the prophecies, understood that judgment is ending and restoration is coming, everything would change. The system depends on you not knowing. The mark on the forehead only works if you believe the lies. Now we need to talk about where we are right now in 2025, because understanding the past is important, but understanding where we are in the prophetic timeline is critical. We are living in the fulfillment period of Revelation 13's prophecies. The 400-year judgment period that started in 1619 ended in 2019. That's 6 years ago. We are now in a transition period. The judgment on black people is ending. The judgment on the oppressors is beginning. And multiple prophecies are converging right now in this moment. You're not watching this video by accident. This is prophetic timing. Let me show you what's happening. Daniel chapter 12 verse 4 prophesies, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. We are living in the information age, the internet, social media, smartphones. Information that was hidden for centuries is now accessible to anyone with a phone. And what's happening? Black people are waking up to their true identity as Israelites. The Hebrew Israelite movement is growing rapidly. More and more people are rejecting slave names and embracing Hebrew names. More people are studying scripture and seeing themselves in the prophecies. More people are connecting the dots between biblical Israel and Black Americans. This knowledge is spreading faster than ever before. Videos like this one reach hundreds of thousands of people. Information that would have been suppressed 50 years ago can't be suppressed anymore. The beast system is losing control of the narrative. They can't control what people learn anymore. The knowledge is increasing exactly as Daniel prophesied. And here's what you need to understand. You finding this video right now is not random chance. This is not the algorithm. This is not coincidence. This is prophetic timing. You were meant to see this now. You were meant to wake up now. God is calling His people out of spiritual sleep in this moment. That's the first convergence point. The awakening is happening right now. But at the same time, the oppression is intensifying. Matthew chapter 24 verse 21. Jesus said, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no nor ever shall be." As the judgment period ends, the oppression actually gets worse before it gets better. It's like the final throes of a dying beast. It knows its time is short, so it lashes out with maximum violence. Look at what's happening right now in 2025 and the past few years. Police killings of Black people caught on camera over and over. George Floyd murdered on video in 2020 with a knee on his neck for over 9 minutes. Breonna Taylor shot in her own home in 2020. Ahmaud Arbery hunted down and killed while jogging in 2020. Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child. The list goes on and on. And these are just the ones caught on camera. How many more happen that we never hear about? This is open warfare. Voting suppression laws have been multiplying since 2020. States passing laws to restrict mail-in voting, reduce early voting limit, drop boxes make it harder to vote. Why? To reduce Black voter turnout. That's the beast system tightening control. Economic inequality got worse after the pandemic. Black unemployment rose higher. Black businesses closed at disproportionate rates. The wealth gap widened. While billionaires got richer during COVID, Black communities suffered. There's an attack on teaching Black history in schools right now. Critical race theory became a boogeyman term. States are banning books about racism, banning lessons about slavery and Jim Crow. They're trying to erase history again. They're trying to put the mark back on minds. Mass incarceration is still expanding. Private prison corporations are still making billions. The 13th Amendment loophole is still being exploited. The oppression is intensifying. But here's what you need to understand. This is prophecy. This is the great tribulation that comes before deliverance. It has to get darkest before the dawn. The urgency of this moment is that we're closer than we've ever been to the breaking point. That's the second convergence point, the intensifying oppression right before the breakthrough. And the third convergence is that the beast is being revealed. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 3 prophesies that man of sin be revealed. Before the judgment falls on the beast system, the beast has to be fully exposed. People have to see it clearly for what it is. And that's happening right now. More people are seeing systemic racism clearly than ever before. After George Floyd's murder, millions of people of all races took to the streets in protest. The largest civil rights protests in American history happened in 2020. Even many white people who previously denied systemic racism existed started to wake up and see it. Institutions are being called out by name. The facade of justice for all is crumbling. America's dragon nature is showing. The pretense of being a Christian nation that values all people equally is being exposed as a lie. International attention on America's racial injustice is at an all-time high. The United Nations has investigated police brutality in America. Global protests erupted over American racism. The world is watching. The beast is being revealed. And in biblical prophecy, the revealing always comes before the judgment. The beast must be exposed before God brings it down. So the fact that it's being revealed right now means judgment on the oppressors is imminent. That's the third convergence point. And the fourth convergence is the separation happening in the black community right now. Matthew chapter 13, verse 49. The angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just. There's a clear division forming. Those who are waking up to their true identity versus those who are still asleep in slave mentality. Those who are rejecting the mark mentally and economically versus those who are fully assimilated into the beast system. Those who are building conscious communities versus those who are still trying to integrate into a system that will never accept them. This separation is necessary for what comes next. God is separating his people from Babylon before he destroys it. In biblical prophecy, before God judges a wicked system, he calls his people out of it. Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. That's Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. The conscious community is growing. People are building alternative institutions, alternative schools, alternative economies, supporting black businesses, creating systems outside the beast system. That separation is happening right now in 2025. And it's necessary because when the mainstream system collapses, those who have already separated will be positioned to survive. Those who are still completely dependent on the beast system will suffer when it falls. Now let me tell you what's coming next, because prophecy doesn't just tell us what happened, it tells us what will happen. And I'm going to give you 5 specific predictions based on scripture. Write these down. Watch for these signs. When they come to pass, you'll know this word was true. First prediction: the fall of economic Babylon. Revelation chapter 18 verse 8 says, "Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine." And in verses 11 through 13, it specifically mentions the merchandise of slaves and souls of men. America's economic system is built on slavery, built on stolen land, built on stolen labor, built on the exploitation of black people for 400 years. And that system is going to collapse. Economic catastrophe is coming to the oppressor nations. Watch for the signs. America's national debt is exploding. Over $30 trillion and growing. Infrastructure is crumbling, bridges collapsing, roads falling apart, water systems failing. The dollar is losing its dominance globally. Other nations are trading in other currencies, creating alternatives to the dollar-based system. According to Revelation 18, we will see in the next 5 to 10 years a major economic crisis that specifically impacts the systems built on oppression. When it happens, it won't be random. It will be judgment. The banks that refused loans to black people will fail. The corporations that exploited prison labor will collapse. The economic structures that created the wealth gap will crumble. And those who rejected the mark, those who built alternative economies, those who got out of debt and supported their own communities will be positioned to survive. The mark system that controlled who could buy and sell will fail. Those who rejected it will be prepared. That's the first prediction. Second prediction: reparations and recompense. Isaiah chapter 61 verse 7. For your shame ye shall have double, and for confusion they shall rejoice in their portion. Therefore in their land they shall possess the double everlasting joy shall be unto them. Double recompense for 400 years of suffering. God promises to repay his people double for what was stolen. This could manifest in multiple ways: actual reparations payments from the government, transfer of wealth through various means, land restoration where black people reclaim property stolen from ancestors, or supernatural provision where resources flow to black communities in unexpected ways. Look at the signs. Reparations conversations are entering mainstream politics for the first time. California formed a reparations task force. Evanston, Illinois started a reparations program. More cities are exploring it. There's growing acknowledgement of historical wrongs and the debt owed. According to Isaiah 61 verse 7, black people will receive double for their trouble, not equal, double. Watch for major reparations legislation to gain momentum in the next decade as pressure mounts. Politicians who oppose it will face consequences. States and cities will start implementing programs. Private institutions that profited from slavery will be forced to pay. This isn't just political. This is prophetic restoration. God himself is going to ensure his people receive what they're owed. That's the second prediction. Third prediction: the scattering ends and the gathering begins. Deuteronomy chapter 30 verses 3 through 5. The Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. The diaspora period is ending. The time of scattering across the globe is coming to an end. Prophecy indicates a gathering and return of the true Israelites to prominence and power. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean a literal physical return to the land of Israel in the Middle East. That land is currently occupied by people who are not the true biblical Israelites. But it means a spiritual return, a cultural return, an economic return, a return to covenant relationship with God, and a return to blessing and power. Look at the signs. Pan-African movements are growing. Black people across the diaspora are connecting. African Americans linking with Africans in the motherland. Caribbean people connecting with Americans. Brazilians, Colombians, people of African descent, everywhere starting to see themselves as one scattered people. There's growing unity in the black community globally. Rejection of divisions that were imposed. According to Deuteronomy 30, the scattering is about to reverse. Watch for major Pan-African political and economic alliances forming in the next 10 to 15 years. African nations rising in global power. Black communities forming economic blocs. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, creating the largest free trade area in the world. Resources and power flowing back to Africa and people of African descent. This is prophetic gathering. That's the third prediction. Fourth prediction: judgment on the oppressors. Revelation chapter 13 verse 10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. The reversal clause. What you did will be done to you. Those who enslaved will themselves be enslaved. Those who killed will face death. This is divine justice, not human vengeance. We're not calling for violence. We're calling for God's righteous judgment to manifest. According to Revelation 13 verse 10, judgment will fall on the oppressor nations and individuals. This could manifest as social collapse in oppressor communities, loss of power and status, economic ruin, or even literal captivity and imprisonment. Look at the signs already appearing. Growing social dysfunction in communities that participated in and benefited from white supremacy. Rising poverty rates, the opioid epidemic devastating certain communities, declining birth rates, increasing suicide rates. Their systems are eating themselves from within. Mass shootings, political chaos, division and hatred. The very things they inflicted on others are coming back on them. Watch for accelerating decline in the oppressor class over the next 10 to 20 years. Not through human action, but through divine judgment. Their wealth will disappear. Their power will crumble. Their institutions will fail. And we don't have to do anything except watch it happen. God Himself will repay. Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Our job is not revenge. Our job is to watch and prepare and stay righteous while judgment falls around us. That's the fourth prediction. And the fifth prediction, the revealing of true identity goes global. Isaiah chapter 11 verses 10 through 12. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the nations, and to it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. And the Lord shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The truth about black people being the true Israelites will become undeniable on a global scale. This won't just be a fringe belief or a movement. This will be mainstream acknowledged truth. Evidence will emerge that can't be suppressed. Archaeological discoveries, DNA studies, historical documents, things that make the connection impossible to deny. According to Isaiah 11, the whole world will know who the true Israel is. This revelation will shake global power structures. It will shake religious institutions. It will force the rewriting of history. It will trigger a massive spiritual awakening in the black community worldwide. Watch for major discoveries in the next 5 to 10 years. Archaeological finds in Africa and the Middle East. Genetic studies showing connections. Ancient documents coming to light. Mainstream scholars starting to acknowledge what has been hidden. When this goes mainstream, when major news outlets can't ignore it anymore, when it becomes common knowledge, everything changes. The entire geopolitical order shifts. The people who claim to be Israel are exposed. The people who were thought to be just descendants of slaves are revealed as God's chosen people. That's the fifth prediction. These 5 predictions are not speculation. They're based on specific scriptures and prophetic patterns, and you're going to see them unfold. Some of you watching this will live to see all 5 come to pass. Now I need you to do something right now. If this truth is hitting you, if your spirit is confirming what you're hearing, if you feel something shifting inside you, I need you to take action. Comment the word "watching" below if you're paying attention to the signs. Let me know you're awake. Let me know you see what's happening. Comment Israel if you understand who you really are. If you recognize yourself in these prophecies. If you're claiming your true identity. Share this video. Your family needs to see this. Your friends need to understand what time it is. Someone in your life is still asleep, and this video could wake them up. You're not crazy for seeing the patterns. You're not paranoid for recognizing the beast system. You're awake. You're aware. You're a watchman on the wall. This isn't just information I'm giving you. This is your story. This is your identity. This is your prophecy. Revelation 13 is talking about you. Your ancestors who suffered through 400 years of judgment. Your generation that's waking up in this moment. Your children who will see the victory and restoration. You are part of this prophetic timeline. You are living in the fulfillment of Scripture right now in 2025. The 400 years of judgment are complete. We're entering a new era, an era of restoration, an era of recompense, an era of power returning to God's people. But you need to understand what's happening so you can position yourself correctly. Drop truth in the comments if you're still with me. Let me see who's really ready for what comes next. Because what I'm about to tell you will determine whether you survive what's coming with strength or whether you get caught in the collapse. You are a witness to prophecy unfolding. You are part of the story. This is your moment to wake up fully. Now that you know the truth about Revelation 13 and Black Judgment, you have a choice in front of you. You can close this video and go back to sleep. You can pretend you didn't hear this. You can try to forget and go back to scrolling through social media and living like nothing's changed. But that mark on your forehead, that mental slavery will remain. The programming will still be there. The lies will still control you. Or you can wake up fully. You can reject the mark. You can prepare for what's coming. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on all notifications. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. You need to do this, because what I'm about to release in upcoming videos will prepare you for the next phase. I'm going to break down more prophecies about Black identity. I'm going to show you the exact steps to take. I'm going to give you the knowledge you need to survive the transition from judgment to restoration. Hit that bell icon. You need to see the next videos. Share this video with at least 3 people who need to wake up. This is your mission. This is your assignment. Your cousin who still thinks he's just African American, who doesn't know he's an Israelite, send this to him. Your mama who's still going to a church that teaches white Jesus and tells her to wait patiently for heaven while suffering on earth, she needs to see this. Your brother who's caught up in the system chasing the American dream, with a mark on his forehead and his hand working himself to death for a system that will never reward him, wake him up. This is spiritual warfare, and you're a soldier in this war now, whether you wanted to be or not. The battle we're in is spiritual, not physical. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The enemy is not other people. The enemy is the demonic forces behind the beast system, the principalities and powers that inspired slavery and colonialism and white supremacy. Spiritual entities that have been making war on God's people for centuries. And you can't fight spiritual enemies with physical weapons. You fight them with spiritual weapons. So let me tell you how to prepare spiritually. First, strengthen your prayer life. You need to be in communication with the Most High God constantly, not just Sunday morning, not just when you're in trouble. Daily, multiple times a day, pray for wisdom to see through deception. Pray for discernment to recognize truth from lies. Pray for protection as you walk in this truth, because the enemy will come after you when you wake up. Second, study Scripture, especially prophecy. Study Daniel. Study Revelation. Study Isaiah. Study Deuteronomy 28. Know what's coming. Know the promises. Know your identity in Scripture. Read it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it or anyone else's word. Verify everything against Scripture. Third, reject the mark mentally. Deprogram yourself from white supremacist lies. Every time a thought comes into your mind that you're inferior, that you're cursed, that you're not chosen, recognize that's programming and cast it out. Replace it with truth. You are Israel. You are chosen. You are royalty. You are a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Reclaim your true identity in your mind. Stop letting the beast system define you. Fourth, build community. Connect with other awakened people. The saints need each other. You can't do this alone. Find others who understand these truths. Build support systems outside the beast system. Help each other. Share resources. Protect each other. Fifth, economic preparation. Get out of debt as much as possible. Stop feeding the beast system with interest payments. Start building alternative economy. Support black businesses instead of corporations. Buy from your community. Invest in your community. Prepare for economic collapse by having some resources outside the mainstream system. And sixth, put on the spiritual armor. Ephesians chapter 6 verses 14 through 17. The belt of truth. Know the truth and speak it. The breastplate of righteousness. Live righteously before God. Your feet shod with the gospel of peace. Walk in your calling, the shield of faith. Believe God's promises even when circumstances look dark. The helmet of salvation. Know you're saved and protected by God. The sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Use scripture as your weapon. This is not fear-mongering. This is wisdom. This is preparation. The judgment on black people is ending. The judgment on the oppressors is beginning. You need to be spiritually positioned correctly when the shift happens. Remove yourself from Babylon, mentally, spiritually, economically, as much as possible. You are not a victim waiting to be rescued. You are a saint coming into your season of restoration. You are part of the prophetic timeline. Your awakening right now is part of God's plan. This is not just a YouTube video you stumbled across. This is a wake-up call. This is your commissioning. You are being called into your purpose in this moment. Subscribe now because the information I'm releasing in the next videos will show you the exact steps to take. I'm going to break down the other curses of Deuteronomy 28 and show you how each one has been fulfilled on black people. I'm going to show you the prophecies about restoration and what your life will look like when God brings you out. I'm going to give you the tools to teach this to others. Your ancestors endured 400 years of judgment, so you could be alive right now in this moment to see the victory. Think about that. They suffered, they died, they persevered through hell, so that you could be here right now on the other side of the 400 years. Don't let their sacrifice be in vain. Wake up. Stay woke. Prepare. You are chosen. You are Israel. You are a watchman on the wall. This is your story unfolding in real time. Let's close with a prayer. If you're watching this, you're not here by accident. You were meant to see this message. Repeat this prayer with me out loud if you can. Most High God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I thank you for opening my eyes to see the truth of Revelation 13. I thank you for revealing to me that I am part of your chosen people, the true Israel. I acknowledge the 400 years of judgment that my ancestors endured. I acknowledge the captivity, the slavery, the oppression, the massacres, the lynchings, the economic warfare, all of it. But I also acknowledge that the judgment period is complete. The 400 years from 1619 to 2019 are finished. And now I stand ready for the restoration, for the double recompense, for the gathering of your people. Father, give me eyes to see the signs as they unfold. Let me recognize your hand moving in current events. Give me ears to hear your voice above the noise of the beast system. Let me discern your truth from the enemy's lies. Give me wisdom to understand prophecy. Help me study your word with understanding. Give me courage to reject the mark both on my hand and on my forehead. Remove from me every lie that the oppressor planted in my mind. Every thought that I am inferior, every belief that I'm cursed, every doubt about who I am. Remove every trace of mental slavery, every bit of self-hatred, every programmed limitation. Replace it with the truth of my identity as Israel. I pray for protection as I walk in this truth. Protect me from those who would silence me, harm me, mock me, or try to pull me back to sleep. Put a hedge of protection around my mind so the enemy cannot plant doubt. Put a hedge around my family so they're safe as I walk this path. Put a hedge around my community of believers. Let the enemy's plans against me fall to the ground and come to nothing. I pray for strength to endure what's coming. As the beast system begins to fall, as judgment comes upon the oppressors, as the world shakes and changes, give me strength to stand firm. Help me prepare spiritually, mentally, economically, physically for the transition. Help me be ready to move from the judgment era into the restoration era. Let me not be caught off guard. I pray for my people who are still asleep, who don't know these truths, yet who are still bound by the mark on their forehead. Wake them up, Father. Send them messengers. Put people in their path who will speak truth. Let videos like this reach those who need it most. Let the truth spread like wildfire across the diaspora, from America to Africa, to the Caribbean, to South America, everywhere your people are scattered. Let this be the generation that wakes up fully. I pray for justice. You said in your word, "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity." You said, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." Let your righteous judgment fall on the beast system. Let those who enslaved, oppressed, murdered, raped, stole from your people receive the recompense they are due, not by our hands, but by yours. Let their wealth be transferred. Let their power crumble. Let their institutions fall. Let them reap what they have sown. But let me remain righteous and not take vengeance into my own hands. I trust you to repay. I pray for the gathering that you promised. As you said in Deuteronomy 30, you will gather us from all the nations where we've been scattered. Begin that work now in my life. Unite the diaspora. Bring together Black people from America, Africa, the Caribbean, South America, everywhere. Help us see we are